The Legend of Zelda franchise has been an ever more convoluted series of prequels and sequels and midquels and requels involving time travel and alternate dimensions and even some paradoxes to spice things up. It can be a lot for someone new to the series to understand how everything fits together, if it even does at all, really. So today we're going to take a look at the complete history of Hyrule, from its inception from the people of Skyloft, all the way to its recapture from the monstrous Calamity Ganon. I've invited 3 other members of the D-Pad here to help us out with some of the more confusing chunks of the series. But without further ado, let's begin. In the beginning, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. The golden goddesses, Din, Nehru, and Farore, representing power, wisdom, and courage respectively, descended from the heavens to the vast emptiness of the world. Din began to form peaks and valleys, cultivating the landmass. Nehru used her wisdom to bring order to the chaos that ruled the land, and Farore created life to exist and inhabit it. As the 3 golden goddesses departed from their newfound world, they left behind a relic representing their influence called the Triforce, a golden icon that would bestow upon whoever laid their hands on it what their heart truly desired, good or evil. The Triforce was entrusted to the goddess Hylia, who sought to protect it and this new world from evil. But the Demon King Demise wanted to use this gift to rule over the world, and sent an army of monsters to slaughter all who stood in his way. Hylia was quick to act in an effort to save the human race, and gathered them all to a single land, which she pulled from the earth and hid high up in the sky, protected by the cover of clouds. She also split the Triforce into 3 pieces, hiding them, her harp, and her sword high in the heavens as well, to be found by the next chosen hero when the time was right. She gathered the other 5 ancient tribes, the Forest Kikwis, the Mountain Gorons, the Aquatic Pirellas, the Subterranean Mogmas, and a tribe of otherwise nameless robots, and placed a seal on Demise, imprisoning him beneath the sealed ground so he could not complete his quest. While Hylia and the tribes were ultimately successful, the goddess was mortally wounded and succumbed to her injuries. In time, the humans of the land they now called Skyloft would come to forget about the surface world, remembering only that the goddess Hylia saved them from a deadly threat, and preached that Hylia was still watching over them to that day. Little did they know that down on the surface, the goddess had already returned and hidden herself away in a golden crystal to keep the seal on Demise intact. Eventually, a Knight Academy was formed to protect Skyloft from the relatively minor threat of enemies among the clouds, but on the 25th anniversary of the founding of the Academy, the headmaster's daughter Zelda was swallowed up by a dark tornado and pulled to the surface world below. One of her childhood friends, a knight in training, gave chase wielding the sacred goddess sword, but Zelda was nowhere to be found. Guided by an old Sheikah woman, the students searched through the nearby domains of the 5 tribes and eventually connected with Zelda again. From her time on the surface world, she had discovered her true identity as a reincarnation of the goddess Hylia, and was being brought to the various temples in the land by a young Sheikah named Impa in order to purify her body and fully return. However, the relentless attacks from the demonic Girahim and the constant revival of the imprisoned beast meant that Zelda would never be safe, so Impa and Zelda escaped through a portal into the distant past where he could not find them. The student then sought out the sacred flames and purified and enchanted the goddess sword, transforming it into the legendary Master Sword. He made his way through the portal after Zelda, where she revealed her heritage as the reincarnated Hylia to him and encased herself in a golden crystal to keep Demise sealed away. Collecting the Song of the Hero from the mystical dragons of the surface, the student unlocked the Sky Keep and collected the 3 pieces of the Triforce, wishing upon it for Demise to be eradicated, bringing Skyloft crashing back down to Earth and freeing Zelda from her confinement. Enraged that his master had been destroyed, Girahim captured Zelda and took her back to the past again, where Demise was still alive and whole. But the student chased after them, confronting the Demon King and striking him down in battle. Demise thus cursed the student and Zelda, declaring that his hatred would haunt them throughout all of time, reincarnating again and again to destroy them. As he drew his last breath, his essence was sealed within the Master Sword, which was left behind in the past to protect the surface world. The student and Zelda returned to their time to create a new land in the image of Hylia that would come to be known as Hyrule, and the descendants of the people of Skyloft would become known as Hylians in her honor. These Hylians over time discovered a prowess for magical abilities, and among the many myths that would arise over the millennia, it was suggested that the pointy ears of a Hylian would help them hear the message of the gods. An ancient Hylian named Roru would eventually become the Sage of Light, perhaps the very first sage, and had a new Temple of Time constructed around the sleeping Master Sword to serve as a protected entrance to the sacred realm in which the Triforce resided. Many years passed, and Hyrule enjoyed an era of prosperity and happiness. However, rather suddenly, the young kingdom was assaulted by an endless barrage of monstrous beings. When all seemed lost, a minuscule race of mouse-like beings called the Minish, known to Hylians as the Picori, gave to the hero of men the Picori Blade and the mystical Light Force. Not to be confused with the Triforce, which is also golden floating triangles. It's fine, don't worry about it. The hero of men successfully drove back the monsters and sealed them within a device called the Bound Chest, sealing it with the Picori blade itself. The princess of that era retained the light force, and the people of Hyrule breathed a sigh of relief at the newfound peace once more. But after nearly a century, trouble began brewing. A Minish named Eslo had been working on a magical hat that could grant the wishes of his wearer, but his apprentice Vaati wanted it for himself. Stealing the hat, Vaati cursed Eslo into the form of a hat himself and disguised himself as a human so he could steal the light force as well. On the day of the 100th annual festival, honoring the last appearance of the Minish, Vaati appeared to the Hylians as a strange spellblade and won the swordsmanship contest, earning him the right to touch the Picori blade and the Bound Chest. Vaati shattered the Picori blade, unlocking the Bound Chest, and released all manner of demons into the land of Hyrule. He turned the Princess Zelda into stone and fled the scene with haste. At the behest of King Daltus, Zelda's childhood friend, the grandson of a great swordsman and blacksmith, embarked on a quest to stop Vaati and cure the princess. He would soon meet Eslo, and the two traveled the land together, collecting the 4 elements to imbue the Picori blade with their strength and craft the Four Sword, a mystical weapon that its wielder could use to split into 4 copies of himself. During this time, Vaati had used the magical cap to cast his influence over the land of Hyrule, brainwashing King Daltus and trying to extract the light force from Princess Zelda. However, the swordsman and Eslo confronted Vaati, and despite his mutation into a fierce wind mage, Vaati was struck down and imprisoned within the Four Sword. In time, Vaati would attempt to escape the Four Sword, but was defeated and imprisoned again by a stranger of whom very little is actually known. Vaati managed to escape from the Four Sword a second time and kidnapped the princess of that era, leaving a young boy to take up the sword, splitting himself in 4 to take on the Wind Mage. Vaati no longer had any recollection of his time as a Minish, wishing only to rule the land from his Palace of Winds with Princess Zelda as his bride. The 4 heroes traveled the countryside in order to ascend to his palace and trapped him within the Four Sword yet again. Hyrule seemed prepared to enjoy a long period of peace, but strife among the country's many races began to cause diplomatic issues, ultimately resulting in civil war throughout the kingdom. Gorons and Zora, Gerudo and Hylians, the war hit every corner of Hyrule, devastating the land. One faction of Hyruleans developed a form of dark magic with the intent of capturing the power of the Triforce itself. While the true extent of this dark magic is not known today, the observed teleportative abilities of this race and its similarity to the temporal anomalies of the ancient Lanayru Desert suggest they had been attempting to bend the very fabric of space-time. This group of interlopers was eventually stopped by the 3 Spirits of Light, having their magic sealed within the fused shadow. They were banished from Hyrule and cast into the Twilight Realm through the Mirror of Twilight, where they mutated into a race now known as the Twilight. Among those caught in the crossfire was a young mother and her baby. Knowing she would not live long, she fled to the Kokiri Forest adjacent to the cursed Lost Woods. She begged the guardian of the forest, the Great Deku Tree, to watch over her son and protect him, dying with him still in her arms. The Deku Tree took the boy in and assimilated him into the culture of his children, the Kokiri, a race of eternal beings with the appearance of children who were given a companion fairy to live alongside them. The boy would grow among them and befriend a Kokiri girl named Saria in particular, but frequently had terrible nightmares of a dark sorcerer from the desert. He became known among some of the Kokiri as the boy without a fairy, but remained a trusted friend of the Great Deku Tree, who sent a fairy named Navi to summon him one fateful day. The Great Deku Tree had been cursed and was holding back a great evil from being released into the forest. The young boy entered the tree and defeated the fierce Goma living within him, and was granted the Kokiri Emerald by the tree before he died. The young boy and Navi bravely journeyed outside the Kokiri Forest and snuck into Hyrule Castle, meeting a young Princess Zelda in the courtyard. She had been spying on a meeting between her father and a dark stranger, the king of the Gerudo, Ganondorf. The young boy instantly recognized him from his nightmares, so Zelda told him to acquire the other 2 spiritual stones in order to claim the Triforce before Ganondorf could. He and Navi traveled up Death Mountain to help eradicate the Goron mine of a massive Dodongo infestation, and over to Zora's domain to bring Princess Ruto back from the belly of the local deity Jabu Jabu, earning them the Goron Ruby and the Zora Sapphire. When they returned to Hyrule Castle, they witnessed Ganondorf chasing Zelda and her guardian Impa out of Hyrule and dismissing the boy outright. Zelda had secretly thrown the Ocarina of Time into the castle moat, which the boy retrieved and used in the Temple of Time to reveal the Master Sword. Lifting the sword from the pedestal of time, the boy was whisked away as he was not yet ready to take on his charge as the Hero of Time. However, this left the Temple of Time fully open and vulnerable, allowing Ganondorf to enter the Sacred Realm and place his hand on the Triforce. He was only able to lay claim to the Triforce of Power, sending the Triforces of Wisdom and Courage elsewhere, but it granted him enough strength to corrupt the heart of the Sacred Realm and completely overtake the country, turning it into a barren wasteland in the span of only 7 years. When the Hero of Time awoke from his slumber, he was informed by the ancient Sage of Light Roru that he would have to awaken the other 5 sages himself, as Ganondorf's dark influence was preventing them from hearing the call. Upon arriving back in the Temple of Time, the hero was also confronted by a strange Sheikah calling themselves Sheik, who informed him of the various peoples who needed his help. He would have to brave the twisted curse of the Lost Woods, descend into the center of the volcano in Death Mountain, dive to the bottom of Lake Hylia, unravel the mystery of Hyrule's bloody past in Kakariko Village, and even aid a rebellion among the ranks of the Gerudo people in the desert in order to cleanse Hyrule of Ganondorf's dark magic and awaken the remaining sages. He was forced to travel back and forth through time to completely save the kingdom, ultimately earning the Triforce of Courage for his bravery and allowing Sheik to feel safe enough to reveal to him her true identity as the missing Princess Zelda. However, once her guise was dropped, she was captured by the all-powerful Ganondorf and brought to his lair. So the Hero of Time ascended the tower and confronted Ganondorf,
where he was unceremoniously killed in battle. What, you played Ocarina of Time? You thought you won? No. I'm gonna set the record straight. The Hero of Time went toe-to-toe with Ganondorf, but he couldn't go round for round. And after the Demon King took down the little orphan boy, he extracted from him the Triforce of Courage, and from the horrified Princess Zelda, the Triforce of Wisdom. With the entire Triforce complete, and literally in his hands, Ganondorf now had the power to wish for anything he desired, becoming the fearsome beast Ganon in the process. So in order to save Hyrule, and perhaps even the world, the Seven Sages used their powers to seal him into the Sacred Realm, which began to wither and rot from the influence of his dark heart. Over time, the world within the Sacred Realm became morose and twisted, becoming a terrifying image of what Hyrule would become should Ganon ever escape. But while he remained trapped in the Dark World, his influence began to seep out, causing people from all around Hyrule to start searching for this golden land. When anyone discovered it, however, they soon found their bodies and minds transformed into beasts, their true selves as dictated by their hearts. Ganon soon amassed an army of these monsters and would ultimately attack the Kingdom of Hyrule in a bid for domination. Without any knight worthy of wielding the Master Sword, the king ordered the Seven Sages to seal the Dark World away entirely, and the Knights of Hyrule to protect them while they did so. It's not entirely clear whether these Seven Sages are the same Seven Sages who knew the Hero of Time, but in the end it really doesn't impact history much, so... At the end of what came to be known as the Imprisoning War, the Seven Sages were successful in sealing away the Dark World, but at a great cost. The Knights of Hyrule were nearly wiped out, the Seven Sages were almost entirely drained of their power, and the Kingdom of Hyrule was impoverished after spending nearly all of its wealth on supplies and munitions. There was peace for many years, and it should be noted that right around this time was when Queen Ambi of Labrynna did not build a big black obelisk known as the Black Tower. Just keep that in the back of your head, it'll make sense in a few minutes. Anyway, Hyrule began unexpectedly suffering from myriad plagues and tragedies. The King of Hyrule decreed that whoever could put an end to the kingdom's troubles would be handsomely rewarded, and followed through on this promise when the problems were solved by a mysterious wizard named Aghanim. Quickly ascending to the position of chief advisor and priest to the king, Aghanim began brainwashing the country's soldiers, and ultimately deposed and murdered the king, and kidnapped the Seven Maidens, descendants of the Seven Sages who sealed away the Dark World in the first place. As Aghanim prepared to send the final maiden, Princess Zelda, to the Dark World as a sacrifice, she cried out in a telepathic message to any remaining Hyruleans carrying the bloodline of the Knights of Hyrule to storm the castle at once to rescue her and put an end to Aghanim's reign of terror. An old knight heard the call and attempted to save the princess, but he fell in battle, handing over his equipment to his trainee nephew, the last of the knight's bloodline, who followed him to the castle. The young knight successfully extracted the princess and hid her in a nearby sanctuary while he sought out the Pendants of Virtue, which would allow him access to the Master Sword. However, while he was able to lift and wield the sword, he returned to Hyrule Castle to discover Aghanim had captured Princess Zelda once again and banished her to the Dark World. The two fought at the top of the castle, and while the young knight vanquished the Dark Wizard, with his final breath he pulled him into the Dark World as well. In time, the young knight was able to rescue the other six maidens from the Dark World and advanced on Ganon's tower, where Aghanim revealed that he had been Ganon's alter ego all along. In a final battle with Ganon within the Pyramid of Power, the knight obliterated him with silver arrows, rescuing the princess and obtaining the complete Triforce, allowing him to undo the damage Ganon had caused and return the Sacred Realm to normal once more. But unbeknownst to them, the mother of Ganon had a plan in mind, in case he should ever be killed, and set her plan in motion. Sometime after the defeat of Ganon, when the young knight was riding near Hyrule Castle, the Triforce seemed to call out to him, beckoning his approach. When he walked up to the Triforce, he found himself teleported to the distant land of Holodrum. Or Labrynna. The order of events here is a little vague, but I've been assured that this is how it happened. I guess. There, the young knight discovered a troupe of traveling performers led by a dancer named Din. However, shortly after introducing herself and dancing with the young knight, she, in reality the Oracle of Seasons, was scooped up by a tornado sent by the vicious General Onox, who used her capture to send the weather of Holodrum into a crisis, and to sink the Temple of Seasons into the underground world of Subrosia. Collecting the 8 essences of nature, the young knight was able to use the Rod of Seasons to restabilize the weather of Holodrum and face down Onox, but not before the strife caused by his assault lit the flame of destruction which Twin Twinrova needed in order to revive Ganon. The young knight was then transported to Labrynna, where Zelda's nurse Impa had hurt herself. The knight helped Impa closer to town, where they enjoyed the performance of a singer named Nehru. However, as with Din, Nehru was secretly the Oracle of Ages, and Impa was in fact a vile sorceress named Varen in disguise. Possessing the body of Nehru, Varen was able to travel 400 years into the past, where she body hopped into the local regency, Queen Ambi, and forced her to start building a big black obelisk known as the Black Tower. See? I told you, this is an adventure about time travel. In fact, a lot of these stories are about time travel. How the hell is a history of Hyrule supposed to work anyway? Once again, the young knight found an important nearby relic called the Harp of Ages, jumped back and forth through time, and defeated the sorceress Varen, but not before she too caused another flame to light, this time the Flame of Sorrow. To make matters worse, Princess Zelda had arrived to try and assist with the situation that was unfolding, only to be captured by Twinrova and used as fuel for the final flame, the Flame of Despair. However, the young knight arrived in the nick of time and defeated Twinrova, interrupting the ceremony and preventing them from reviving Ganon's mind. They instead offered up their own bodies to Ganon to fill the gap in the ritual, which brought Ganon back as a shrieking, mindless beast bent on utter annihilation. The knight was finally able to defeat Ganon a second time and departed from these distant lands by boat on his way back to Hyrule. But the knight never returned home again. As the knight braved the open seas, he was caught in a fierce storm, and his boat was destroyed when the mast was struck by lightning. He was tossed into the sea and swept up by the waves until he washed up on the shores of the mysterious Koholint Island. A young girl named Marin discovered the knight's unconscious body on the beach, and along with her father Tarin, brought him back to their house where he eventually awoke. As the knight struggled to understand where he was, he began to notice that the people, places, and creatures on the island bore a strange resemblance to things he had seen in Hyrule, Holodrum, and Labrynna, and the stories he had heard of the Hero of Time. Even Marin appeared to look just like Princess Zelda, though she had never heard the name before. To make matters worse, the inhabitants of the island seemed to be almost apathetic to his plight, stating that there was nothing outside the island anytime the knight tried to look for a way out. On the instruction of a talking owl, the knight began collecting the 8 instruments of the sirens in an effort to wake the windfish, who he understood would allow him to leave. However, the more he pushed further into the island and its lore, the more the very world around him seemed to fight back. Even the very monsters he vanquished seemed more concerned about waking the windfish than their own deaths, until a mural at the Southern Face Shrine revealed to the knight that Koholint Island was itself a world created by the dream of the windfish, and by waking it, he would obliterate everything that existed there. Struggling with the weight of destroying Koholint Island and all life upon it, the knight continued to push onward, eventually reaching the top of Mount Tamaranch, where he played the Ballad of the Windfish and fought a creature known only as the Nightmare. It took the forms of beings the knight had fought before, but the knight was still able to purge it from the island. He ascended a seemingly endless staircase where the Windfish thanked him for defeating the Nightmare, and the two awoke together. While the knight found himself floating among his shipwreck in the middle of the ocean, history is unclear as to whether he ever found dry land and lived on. The Triforce was eventually split into 3 pieces again over the fear that its power would be misused once more, and mysteriously the 3 pieces all seemed to vanish without a trace. After centuries of peace, a fearsome warlock named Yuga attacked the kingdom of Hyrule from an alternate dimension called Lorule and trapped the 7 sages and Zelda in a set of paintings. Wait, so Lorule's not the Dark World? And Zelda's not a sage anymore? Bummer. It should be noted that these sages are descendants from the 7 sages who we mentioned in the Imprisoning War, but these sages aren't all human, so, something freaky's going on. Using the power of the imprisoned sages, Yuga is able to summon Ganon once more, but rather than unleash him into the world again, Yuga uses Ganon's affinity for the Triforce of Power to merge the 3 into a single horrific being. But just as Yuga was about to kill a young apprentice blacksmith who had tried to stop the beast from destroying the kingdom, a dark princess named Hilda intervened and held Yuga back, telling the blacksmith to go save the sages. With the help of a bracelet given to him by the mysterious weapons dealer Ravio, the blacksmith was able to save them all and awaken the Triforce of Courage within himself, returning to Hyrule Castle to discover that it was Hilda who had orchestrated the madness all along. The Kingdom of Lorule once had their own Triforce, but the royal family in that dimension had it destroyed to prevent its misuse from ending the world. Hilda stole the Triforce of Wisdom from Princess Zelda, but this was in turn stolen by Yuga, using his 2 pieces against the blacksmith's 1. With Zelda's help, Yuga was defeated, and Ravio revealed himself to be Lorule's version of the blacksmith who saved Hyrule. Ravio and Hilda returned to Lorule with nothing, but by wishing on the complete Triforce of Hyrule, the blacksmith and Zelda were able to give Lorule its own Triforce once again. Years later, the blacksmith decided to venture out of Hyrule and came upon a land called Hytopia, where fashion and style reign supreme. Despite trying to hide his heroic nature by dressing in unconventional clothing, Hytopians believed that the true sign of a hero was a pair of pointy ears and long, dirty blonde sideburns. I'll allow it. The evil witch, Lady Maud, from the Drablands had cursed Princess Styla to be stuck in a dark jumpsuit for the rest of her life. So the blacksmith and 2 other schlubs made their way through the land of Hytopia to fulfill the prophecy of 3 heroes forming a totem to save the kingdom. This journey would never be referred to again in the Chronicles of Hyrule or its neighboring countries. Finally controlling a united Triforce for an extended period of time, Hyrule entered an era of vast prosperity and peace, reviving the kingdom that had struggled since the appearance of Ganondorf centuries ago. As the King of Hyrule's health began to wane, he searched for anyone who could inherit personally the whole Triforce to continue the charge of protecting the kingdom. However, he was unable to find someone who could, so he split the Triforce into 3 pieces once more before passing on. His son the Prince tried to lay claim to the pieces, but was only able to take the Triforce of Power and Wisdom, with the Triforce of Courage out of his reach. A wizard approached the prince and told him that his sister Princess Zelda must know the location of the Triforce of Courage, so he demanded she tell him where it was. She refused, and in a fit of blind rage, the prince had the wizard cast a sleeping spell on her, one so powerful that the wizard died casting it, leaving the curse apparently irreversible. Wrought with grief and remorse, the prince placed the sleeping Zelda in the North Castle and decreed that all female descendants of the royal family be named Zelda in her honor. The Triforce remained separated, and the kingdom began to shrink and divide, ending the era of prosperity. Some generations later, Ganon had been once again revived, sending his armies to conquer the weakened Hyrule from atop Death Mountain, and stealing the Triforce of Power. Fearing its misuse, Princess Zelda shattered the Triforce of Wisdom into 8 pieces, hiding them throughout the kingdom to stall Ganon's plan. She also ordered her nurse, Impa, to escape the castle and find anyone brave enough to fight against Ganon and win. So Impa fled through the countryside until she found herself surrounded by beasts. Just as she was about to be struck down, a young traveler jumped in the way and drove the monsters off. Impa told the traveler of her and Zelda's plight, and he agreed to take up the quest to stop Ganon, ultimately collecting the 8 fragments of the Triforce of Wisdom, defeating the Demon King in his lair, and reclaiming the Triforce of Power, and rescuing the captive Princess Zelda. However, even with Ganon defeated once more, his armies refused to stop fighting. They knew that if they sprinkled the blood of the traveler who defeated him onto his ashes, they could revive Ganon once again. While they continued to cause destruction and mayhem throughout Hyrule, the traveler discovered a glowing mark in the shape of the Triforce on his left hand. Impa saw the marking and told the traveler the tale of the sleeping Princess Zelda, and if he were to collect the 6 crystals from around the outer reaches of the kingdom, he could claim the Triforce of Courage and reunite the 3 as one. He was ultimately successful in obtaining the crystals from the country's many shrines, and he vanquished both the powerful Thunderbird and a creature composed entirely of his own shadow, reclaiming the lost Triforce of Courage at long last. The Kingdom of Hyrule once again held the completed Triforce, and, for years, that's where it ended.
Well, that would be how it ended if the Hero of Time had actually died.
What are you talking about? I just went through like a ton of facts about
I was listening, but the fact of the matter is that the Hero of Time did not fall to Ganondorf. It went the other way around. When the Hero of Time squared off against the Gerudo, he managed to strike him down in battle with the help of a few light arrows. But with the Triforce of Power in hand, he wasn't going down that easily. He brought his tower crashing to the ground and returned to life with the help of his Triforce piece, transforming him into the Demon King Ganon. Despite knocking the Master Sword away from the Hero of Time, he reclaimed it and struck Ganon down, destroying his monstrous form and allowing the 7 sages to seal him away in the Sacred Realm. The Hero of Time disappeared as he had many times during the conflict, and the people of Hyrule believed he would return to save them again one day. The Triforce of Courage, no longer held by anyone, shattered into 8 pieces and vanished without a trace. For many generations, Hyrule remained safe and the seal of the 7 sages held fast, but eventually, it started to weaken for reasons no one could figure out. Ultimately, Ganondorf escaped his confinement, and the Hyrulean people prayed to the Hero of Time for his return. But the hero never came. King Daphnis no Hansen Hyrule chose to confront Ganondorf and use his magic to stall for time, but failed to hold him back for long. At the behest of the Hyruleans' prayers, the 3 golden goddesses instructed the people to climb to the highest mountains in the land and flooded the entire kingdom. The king then split the Triforce of Wisdom in 2, keeping one by his side and giving the other to his young daughter Zelda, instructing her to flee to the mountaintops with her servants, as the kingdom was buried beneath the waters that would become known as the Great Sea. The goddesses sealed the castle within a magic sphere and used the Master Sword and the Pedestal of Time to freeze Hyrule in time. Ganondorf and King Daphnis remained trapped within the moment of time for centuries. The people of Hyrule would go on to live out their lives generation after generation, cultivating a new seafaring civilization that would eventually forget the existence of Hyrule and all its lore. Among what little legend remained was the notion of a hero of time dressed in green. So when the boys of Outset Island celebrated their birthday, it became tradition to wear the green garb of the hero in his memory. Even the sages went mostly forgotten, with Fado the Kokiri Sage of Wind and Laruto the Zora Sage of Earth remaining in their respective temples for ages. They were likely chosen to protect the power of the Master Sword in the event of Ganondorf's return, and even as their races evolved into the Wooden Koroks and Avian Rito, they stayed and guarded their sacred grounds. The Antediluvian Princess, as some would call her, passed down the piece of Triforce of Wisdom as an heirloom from mother to daughter again and again, and again and again, and the descendants of her and her servants would soon take to the sea themselves, becoming a pirate crew. The last in this line of pirate captains passed the relic on to her daughter Tetra as a necklace, identity forgotten, before she passed away, leaving Tetra to lead her pirate crew. Around this time, Ganondorf had found a way to break out of his confinement once more, reaching the surface of the Great Sea. He sought out the two sages of the Master Sword, Fado and Laruto, and killed them both in order to prevent his downfall. He also began searching for all blonde, pointy-eared Hylians, sending his companion the Helmarok King to capture them and bring them down to the Forsaken Fortress. He was doing so in an effort to prevent the royal bloodline from awakening again, and set a series of events in motion when Captain Tetra was captured, but unknowingly she was switched with a young island boy's sister named Aryll. While the island boy and Tetra's pirate crew were able to follow the Helmarok King back to the Forsaken Fortress, the boy was soon captured and brought face to face with Ganondorf. Deciding that the boy was no threat, Ganondorf hurled him into the sea, where he would eventually wash up on Windfall Island, waking up next to an enchanted sailboat calling itself the King of Red Lions. Using the Wind Waker, a magical artifact that could control the direction of wind, the two collected the Goddess Pearls, which raised the Tower of Gods and opened a passageway to Hyrule. Acquiring the Master Sword, the boy once again went to the Forsaken Fortress, where Ganondorf remained unimpressed, stating that the Master Sword had none of its magical power thanks to his earlier intervention. Returning once more to Hyrule with Tetra in tow, the King of Red Lions revealed itself to be imbued with the soul of King Daphnis, and that Captain Tetra was in fact a direct descendant of his, making her the rightful ruler of Hyrule, Princess Zelda. He reunited the two previously separated golden relics, recomposing the Triforce of Wisdom. Awakening Makar the Korok and Medley the Rito as the sages of Wind and Earth respectively, the island boy Mitch collected the broken pieces of the Triforce of Courage from the bottom of the ocean, and using it and the re-energized Master Sword, stormed Hyrule Castle one final time. There, Ganondorf trivially extracted the other two Triforce pieces from the island boy and Tetra, and declared his wish to push back the water and bring Hyrule back to its former glory with him as its king. However, before he could make his wish, King Daphnis placed his hand on the Triforce, instead wishing for Hyrule to be washed away forever, never to return. Ganondorf, driven mad with rage, fought against the boy and Tetra, but some quick swordplay from the island child left the Master Sword embedded in his forehead, turning him into stone, an artificial pedestal of time himself. The king sent the boy and Tetra back to the surface, and stayed behind as he, Ganondorf, and all of Hyrule were lost forever. The island boy and Tetra decided to continue adventuring on the high seas, looking for a new land to call home. While doing so, they investigated the home of the Ocean King, a magical flying whale that may or may not be the Windfish. Hearing rumors of a mysterious ghost ship. When the ghost ship appeared, Tetra was compelled to jump aboard, but the island boy fell into the ocean when he tried to bring her back. Waking up on Murkay Island, he met a fairy named Ciela and her grandfather Oshus. Borrowing the ship of a sea captain named Linebeck, he and Ciela made their way through the temple of the Ocean King, awakening the spirits of power and wisdom, and discovering that Ciela herself was the spirit of courage, and boarded the ghost ship where Tetra had been turned to stone. Oshus revealed to the boy that he was in fact the Ocean King, and sent him on a quest to find the Phantom Sword, the only weapon capable of defeating the monster responsible, an entity called Bellum. Collecting the 3 pure metals and crafting the legendary sword, the island boy challenged and defeated Bellum, after which the Ocean King returned them to their ship. While the adventure had taken some time, the pirate crew told the boy and Tetra that they had only been gone for 10 minutes, calling into question whether the events had ever really transpired at all. The boy and Tetra's crew eventually made landfall on a new continent, where the Tower of Spirits stood high above the land. There, she founded New Hyrule and had landmasses connected by a series of spirit tracks to make it easier to travel from one place to the next. She would also decree that all soldiers of New Hyrule wear a green uniform in honor of her friend, the Hero of Winds. 100 years later, the spirit tracks began to disappear. Tetra's descendant, Princess Zelda, gave a royal engineer a soldier's uniform and had him investigate the cause of the disturbance. Soon after, Chancellor Cole revealed himself as a demon who sought to revive the Demon King Malladus, sealed beneath the Tower of Spirits. There's a lot of different Demon Kings at this point. You got the Demon King Ganon, you got the Demon King Bellamy, you got the Demon King Demise, you got the Demon King Malladus, you got the Demon King Finn Balor. I don't know why they don't have different titles, but just go with it. I hope you're following along. Chancellor Cole and his assistant Burn stole Princess Zelda's body, leaving her as a spirit unable to interact with most objects. However, as she and the engineer ascended the Tower of Spirits, she found herself able to possess the bodies of phantoms that haunted the various corridors. When they arrived at the top of the tower, Malladus was revived and escaped into the Dark Realm. Not to be confused with the Dark World or the Sacred Realm. And the engineer and Zelda chased after. There they defeated Malladus once and for all. And the Locomos ascended into the heavens, having completed their task of ensuring the safety of Hyrule. And for years, that's where it ended.
Wait. That's not how it happened at all.
What?
So there was a premonition that the Gerudo King had an assault on Hyrule, but that never actually happened. The rest of it is actually just a fantasy.
No, that definitely happened. He's at the bottom of the ocean now.
The Demon King is dead. See, the alleged hero of time was a boy who had a vision of the future. He was orphaned by the war, yes, but when he arrived at Hyrule Castle, he came with a warning of what was to come. He saw the Gerudo King Ganondorf addressing the King of Hyrule and told the princess that he had seen a future in which Ganondorf betrayed the king, leading to a terrible war that would scar the country for generations. She took the matter seriously and informed her father as the young boy retrieved a horse that had taken a liking to him from the nearby ranch. Upon his return to the castle, he was greeted by the princess once more, who told him to take the Ocarina of Time far away from the Kingdom of Hyrule until Ganondorf could be dealt with. The Ocarina of Time being the key to unlocking the sacred realm from within the Temple of Time, it could not be allowed to fall into Ganondorf's clutches. The boy vanished upon his steed, and Hyrule decided to keep the Gerudo people at arm's length. After his initial plan to assault the sacred realm and obtain the Triforce failed, Ganondorf grew restless and desperate, becoming blind to the danger around him, resulting in his capture and imprisonment within the Arbiter's ground, deep in the Gerudo Desert, where he lay for several years. Around the same time, another dark plot began to unfold. In another world, in a land called Termina, there lived a Skull Kid who befriended 4 giants, the deities of that land. However, the giants could not watch over the land forever, so they decided to slumber, each taking 100 steps in a different cardinal direction, dividing the countryside into 4 regions, and told the people of Termina that should they need help, they should call out to them. The Skull Kid felt abandoned and hopeless, and began to lash out at those around him. The denizens of Termina became frustrated with his actions, and called out the 4 giants to stop his madness. The giants appeared and ordered the Skull Kid to leave Termina at once, or be killed. Stunned, the Skull Kid left Termina and ascended to the realm of Hyrule for a time. However, finding himself not getting along well with the Skull Kids of the Lost Woods, he returned to Termina in secret, living in lonely solitude until a pair of fairies named Tattle and Tail befriended him. Not long after, he attacked a traveling salesman and stole an ancient, cursed mask once used for bizarre hexing rituals. Wearing the mask granted him nigh insurmountable magic abilities, but cost him true control over his thoughts and actions, and he began to torment the people of Termina, sometimes merely pranking them, other times horrifically transforming or even wounding them. As his final act of defiance, the Skull Kid cursed the whole of Termina, preventing the 4 giants from being awoken as he caused the moon to begin plummeting towards the earth. Luckily, just 3 days before the moon was to crash into Termina, the Skull Kid happened to prank the young orphan boy by stealing his horse on their way through the Lost Woods, leading him to charge after and fall through a portal into the world of Termina. While the boy was also briefly cursed to take the form of a Deku Scrub, he was able to use the Ocarina of Time to heal himself and discovered that he was able to use the instrument to return himself to the moment he arrived in the land's capital city, Clocktown. Using his newfound ability to reset the final 3 days of Termina, the young boy learned about the land and its inhabitants, helping them deal with their many anxieties and collecting several other enchanted masks before challenging the Skull Kid and following him to the surface of the moon to confront Majora, the entity whose soul was crafted into the mask. Upon cleansing Termina of the blight that was Majora, the Skull Kid was freed from its grasp and returned the now benign mask to its original owner. The 4 giants returned to their slumber, reassuring the Skull Kid that they would not abandon him, and that they were still his friend. expeditions, and the young orphan boy, presumably exhausted from the experience, returned to Hyrule to begin training as a knight. Eventually deciding that keeping Ganondorf around was becoming a growing threat, the royal Hyrule family decided that they were going to execute the Demon King. It did not exactly go as planned. The sages of that era were instructed to carry out the execution, crafting a blade known as the Sword of the Six Sages to do so. However, as the sword was pushed into Ganondorf's chest and he drew his final breath, the unthinkable happened. The Triforce of Power appeared suddenly in his possession, preventing him from succumbing to his injury. Enraged, Ganondorf ripped himself from his confinements and obliterated the Sage of Water with a single touch. He pulled the Sword of the Six Sages from his chest and moved to slay the 5 who remained, but the sages activated the Mirror of Twilight, tearing him into the Twilight Realm, where he would be banished like the dark interlopers of old for the rest of his life. And for a time, there was peace in the land of Hyrule. The young orphan boy lived and died as a knight whose exploits were never truly known, and eventually the threat of Ganondorf was forgotten. However, trouble was brewing in the Twilight Realm. A member of the Twilight race known as Zant became enraged at the state of his people's imprisonment within the realm, and sought to usurp the throne from Midna, the rightful ruler. As he plotted to overthrow the princess, he discovered a fiery, formless entity that offered him immense power to obtain his objectives if he continued his assault into the land of Hyrule. Zant agreed, worshipping the being, and so a bond was formed between the King of Shadows and his new god, the imprisoned Ganondorf. Using his newfound strength, Zant easily conquered the Twilight Realm, transforming Midna into an impish figure and banishing her into the light, and began to engulf Hyrule in darkness, quelling the power of the light spirits protecting the land and forcing the surrender of Princess Zelda in order to save the Hyrulean people from extinction. A young rancher from the southern village of Ordon found himself trapped in the shadows as well, and cursed into the form of a grey wolf. He and Midna sought to destroy Zant using the fused shadow, the sum of the interloper's power in Hyrule. When that failed and the Princess Zelda sacrificed her life to save Midna's, the two reconstructed the Mirror of Twilight in the Arbiter's grounds, the rancher learning the ways of swordsmanship from the forlorn spirit of the orphan boy turned knight, and took on Zant directly in the Twilight Realm. While they were successful in defeating him, his bond with Ganondorf meant that he could not die, leaving them to confront the Demon King in Hyrule Castle. Despite his immense power, Ganondorf too was overcome by the rancher and Midna, but with his bond to the revived Zant, he too was indestructible. Unfortunately for him, it was at this time that Zant chose to end his life, breaking his own neck while the Master Sword was embedded in Ganondorf's chest. Is that what happened? With the bond broken at last, Ganondorf watched helplessly as the Triforce of Power abandoned him, leaving the Demon King to die in the open fields of Hyrule. Princess Zelda was revived, and Princess Midna was returned to the Twilight Realm to lead her people, destroying the Mirror of Twilight in the process to prevent their worlds from intersecting again. However, the Mirror of Twilight was not the only magical mirror in Hyrule, and in time another would come to haunt the kingdom. With Ganondorf dead, the Gerudo people were slowly able to reunite with the other peoples of Hyrule and cast aside their previous conflicts. As before, a male child was born every century who became the king of the Gerudo, and for a time there was peace. However, many generations after Ganondorf's death, a new male heir was born to the Gerudo, stained by the curse of demise. He broke the laws of the Gerudo by entering the ancient pyramid to steal a sacred trident, and was cast out by his own people. Using a dark mirror to create shadows of Hyrule's most trusted swordsman, he created a distraction to force him to draw the sacred Four Sword, splitting him into 4 copies of himself and allowing the Wind Mage Vati to be freed once more. The swordsman and his duplicates fought through Hyrule and were successful in destroying Vati in his monstrous state once and for all, and instead sealed Ganon in the Four Sword, where he lay for, well, ever, as far as I can tell. The Four Sword was never mentioned again in the histories of Hyrule, and for years, that's where it ended.
Now, any one of these stories may be true, but regardless of the history, the Hyrulean people had learned from their past mistakes and enacted a plan to ensure that when, as expected, Ganon returns, they'd be ready. Sometime far in the future from past events, the Sheikah tribe constructed a set of massive mechanical marvels to watch over the land and protect it, christening them the Divine Beasts. When the Demon King did ultimately reappear as the Calamity Ganon after centuries of silence, a member of each of the 4 primary races of Hyrule at the time, the Gorons, the Zora, the Rito, and the Gerudo, piloted the Divine Beasts and drove Ganon away once more. But the king of that era grew anxious that weaponry that devastating could fall into the wrong hands, and ordered the Divine Beast to be buried and forgotten, which the Sheikah reluctantly obeyed. Nearly 100 centuries passed without an attack from Ganon, but when his forces began to rise once more, the current king had the Divine Beast dug up and readied once again. While this was being prepared, the royal family began their selection of champions from the same 4 races as before, ultimately choosing Daruk of the Gorons, Princess Mipha of the Zora, the Rito warrior Revali, and the Gerudo chief Urbosa. In an effort to improve the team's morale, Daruk suggested a ceremony to announce the champions to Hyrule, and introduce the Hylian Knight who would be entrusted to wield the Master Sword. Unfortunately, the team had very little cohesion and struggled to get along. Revali remained distant and distrustful of the motives of the other champions, while Zelda seemed to have no real confidence in their ability to succeed, particularly in the case of the Hylian Knight, with whom she showed an ever-increasing frustration when it came to his resilience and ambition. In fact, other than Zelda's long-term friendship with Urbosa, thanks to her being old friends with the late Queen, Daruk's very Goron fraternal companionship with the team and the Knight in particular, and an apparent romance blooming between the Hylian Knight and Princess Mipha, there was little to no semblance of a team truly forming. To make matters worse, Zelda was growing increasingly agitated with her inability to achieve any noticeable magic affinity of her own, with the Sheikah Slate outright refusing to even acknowledge her. Along with that, her father, King Rhoam Bosphoramus Hyrule, demanded that she stop traveling to research the unearthed shrines in order to better prepare for Ganon's arrival. When the day finally came to fight Calamity Ganon, the team went their separate ways to pilot the Divine Beasts, unaware of Ganon's trap. He had sent a blight to each of the Divine Beasts, cornering and killing the princess's champions when they arrived, as well as taking over the myriad guardians intended to defeat him. Realizing the desperate gravity of the situation, the Knight and Zelda attempted to confront the Calamity Ganon, but were overwhelmed by the sheer strength of his forces. The Knight fought to his very last breath and was just barely saved by Zelda, who locked herself and Calamity Ganon in an endless battle at the heart of Hyrule Castle. 100 years later, the Knight awoke from his rest in the Shrine of Resurrection, received the Sheikah Slate, and began his quest at the behest of an old man who would later reveal himself to be the spirit of King Rhoam. He traveled the vast landscape of Hyrule, freeing the rampaging Divine Beasts from the control of their blights, and aiding the 4 tribes of Hyrule in the aftermath of Calamity Ganon's victory. He would eventually find the strength to confront Calamity Ganon head-on, and, with the assistance of the spirits of the princess's champions and Zelda herself, defeat Ganon once more using the ancient power of the Triforce to annihilate him and free the kingdom. And for now, that's where it ends. Rumor has it that there are still stories waiting to be told and details that have yet to be shared. But who knows what tales might remain and what new faces might emerge. Over tens of thousands of years, Hyrule has seen no shortage of pain and heartache, but has too seen great prosperity, safety, and peace. So long as the fated hero and the sacred princess are there to save the day, Hyrule is in good hands.
Well, excuse me, princess.
Check it out. You got the